Hey all, this is Redditosker, and today I'd like to talk about some changes that I think would benefit Helldivers 2. Because there's a lot of little things about it that I think are annoying. None of those things are deal breakers. This game is incredible and deserves its unexpected and massive success. But still, I think the things I'm going to mention are common sense and relatively unintrusive, and their implementation would make the game a lot better, I think. So let's get started. Number 1. Obviously, the most important problem facing Helldivers 2 is the fact that people can't log in. It doesn't matter how good your game is if people can't play it. And while I'm sure that the developers are doing everything they can to quickly fix that, there is one thing they could do to mitigate the problem. And that's implementing an AFK timer. Currently, the way it works in Helldivers 2 is once you log in, you can stay logged in indefinitely. And people are noticing that. Because the servers have so many people trying to play, it's hard to get into the game. And if you don't get to log in immediately, there's no telling how long it will take you to get in. So what people have been doing is staying logged in, so they don't have to deal with the risks of not being able to play when they want. I saw this image being posted around, and I'd like to read you some of the comments that are on it. Came here to observe my whiners for the day and to say I just stayed logged in on my ship all day to watch you all suffer. You're welcome. Here's another one. Good morning, whiners and complainers. I just got a good 12 hours of sleep and stayed logged in just for you. Now I can resume playing and not let one of you in. Enjoy being toxic. Have a good day, everyone. Okay, so there are currently an unknown number of people that have discovered that they can play whenever they want if they simply stay logged in. And as a result, they're taking up a slot that could have been used by someone who wanted to play right that moment. An AFK timer would just be a positive with no drawbacks, in my opinion. Not only would it boot people that are abusing this system, it would also open up a slot for someone that wants to play. And in the same stroke, it would help alleviate the problem of people not being able to log in. It wouldn't fix that problem, but it would help. Alright, next, I would like them to fix remapping the stratagems. So the stratagems are one of my favorite things about Helldivers 2. I like the tactile sensation of having to push these buttons in the right order to call down ordnance. But I don't like having to do it with my left hand. If you're playing with a controller, stratagems are bound to the D-pad. And that's a terrible place for them. It sucks having them there. Because it's hard and awkward to use those stratagems while you're still on the move. If you want to walk or run while entering the stratagem codes, you'll need to use your left hand to move the left stick, then remove your right hand from the controller and input the stratagem codes on the D-pad with your right hand. It is terribly uncomfortable. If you're playing with the mouse and keyboard, you don't have that problem. On mouse and keyboard, the stratagems are by default bound to the WASD, but you can simply rebind them and make them work with the arrow keys. And every mouse and keyboard player that I've talked to has done that. This lets them not only move, but it lets them use their dominant hand, their right hand, to input the stratagems, which lets them do it much more quickly. Now you can kind of do that for the controller as well. You can rebind the stratagems to work with the face buttons. In that way it's still intuitive. The up is triangle, down is X, left is square, circle is right. And because you're using your dominant hand, inputting the code is rapid. It's much easier to do than before. And it's also more comfortable because you can move and run while you do it. But if you do that, you'll start realizing that a number of problems arise by trying to put the buttons this way. First of all, if you bind the new stratagem buttons to the face buttons, you would expect that the face buttons would stop doing what they normally do when you're holding down L1 to get the stratagem menu out. If you press the circle button during a stratagem, your character will crouch. If you press it 2 times to do a stratagem, your character will dodge. The fix that I'm asking for the developers is to change how this works. When I open the stratagem menu, I want the buttons that I'm using for the stratagem menu to become disabled for any other purpose other than inputting stratagems. And it's weird because it already kind of works that way for other buttons. If I do that and I press triangle, it doesn't switch to another weapon. And if I press square, it doesn't reload my current weapon, even if it could be reloaded. It's just the circle button that seems to have this problem. And because it's just the circle button, I have to assume it's an oversight, and it was meant to work the way I want it to work anyway. Now, because I really liked using the face buttons to input stratagems, I fiddled around with the controllers. I moved the dodge button away from the circle button and put it as the R1 button. But the R1 button is already used to ping things for other players, and if you hold it down, it's what lets you do callouts and I think emotes or something. And so those needed to be put elsewhere and they couldn't be put on the face buttons. Because if I moved the ping to the circle button, it would work fine there, but whenever I put in a stratagem, I would ping something. So eventually I just shifted everything around until I ran out of buttons to put things in places, and it worked fine. But then I go and play the game, and whenever you have to go to the terminal and input a code, it turns out that the X button also has this problem. So if you interact with the terminal, and the terminal has you input down as part of its code, well, down is the X button, and down is also the interact button, and so it will kick you out of doing what you were doing, forcing you to go back in to continue inputting the code. And at that point I just gave up trying to find an optimal setup that would allow me to use the face buttons for stratagems. So I really hope the developers fix this. I really think it might be a bug because, like I said, the triangle and square buttons work the way I want them to. It's just the circle and X that also need to be turned off when the menu is open. And frankly, I think using the face buttons for the stratagems just should be the default. It's a much more comfortable and ergonomic way of inputting codes. Alright, next is I would like the game to let me have private sessions and password-only sessions. Currently, when you play Helldivers, you can only make the game either public to everyone or to friends only. Presumably, it's set up this way because the game has a very co-op orientation. From the doors that you need two people to open, to the weapons that become more effective if two people operate them. This is a co-op game, and the game wants you to know that. And that's fine, but there are times when I don't want to play with anybody, but I would still like to play. Or I would like to play with one or two people, but not necessarily open up my lobby to anybody in my friends list. Or maybe for some reason I want to play with randoms, but I don't want to play in a 4-man random team. Maybe I'm more comfortable with just 2 people. And if that's the case, I should have the option of restricting how many people can join the lobby. Alright, the next thing is, I would like different loadouts for my equipment and stratagems that I can choose for missions instead of having to manually place whatever stratagems I want. Depending on whether I'm fighting the bugs or the automatons or what mission type I'm currently doing, I might have different equipment or different stratagems that I prefer for that enemy type or that mission type, and I would like to choose between pre-built loadouts instead of having to manually change my weapons or choose my stratagems for every mission. It's not a huge deal, but it's a quality of life feature that I would like to have. Alright, this next change might be more controversial because it's more complicated. I don't like how the co-op weapon reloading works right now. I think it's just not good. I love the idea of certain weapons being more effective if you have a co-op partner to help you reload them. I don't just think that's a good idea, I think that's a fantastic idea. It encourages cooperative play, it can incentivize players to coordinate with each other, and it's just cool. It's cool to look at when people are doing it. However, the current way it's set up is not good. Here's the issue. In order for you to get the benefit of someone else reloading your weapon for you, then you have to convince them to take the backpack. And this causes several problems, because you either have to take the backpack yourself and completely forgo the ability to cooperatively reload, or you convince someone else to take the backpack, in which case you lose the ability to reload yourself if you wanted to. And your partner is burdened with your backpack, so he can't have his own backpack. And you both make this sacrifice for the dubious benefit of a faster reload. For the autocannon, this is simply not a good deal. For something like the recoilless rifle, it's a slightly better deal, but it's still not a good deal. Your teammate loses access to his backpack. He has to kind of stick to you in case you need a reload because you can't reload yourself. Because he kind of has to stick to you, that partner is not playing as freely as he would otherwise like to. And there's no guarantee that him reloading your weapon faster will result in a better outcome than if he had simply not done that and contributed to attacking the enemies himself. And even if you personally were willing to eat all of those costs for the dubious benefit of firing faster, nobody's going to want to carry your backpack for you because it's not practical. And as a result, this really cool idea, this really cool co-op system, it gets pretty much unused. And again, I think this sucks because I like the idea. It's an incredibly good idea. And here's how I think that it can be fixed. Instead of having someone else carry the backpack and only that person being able to reload your weapon, you should carry the backpack and any other player can come up to you and reload your weapon with the ammo in your backpack. And if no other player is around to do the reload, you can still do the reload yourself. This is a much better system. It fixes all of the problems I've detailed. It lets you reload your weapon with the ammo in your backpack. It doesn't intrude with any other player's loadout, freeing them up to get and play however they want. It doesn't tie any one person to be close to you in case you want to rapidly fire your weapon. Everybody can play freely, and then if you want to rapidly use your recoilless rifle or your speeder or whatever, you can ask any player closest to you, and whoever wants to can come over to you and help. It might even increase the amount of cooperative play, not decrease it, because another Helldiver can realize what you're doing, let's say with a recoilless rifle, and for their backpack slot choose to bring in a supply pack, which they can use to replenish your recoilless ammo. I think this is a much better system, and frankly, it makes more sense. It doesn't make sense that the person carrying the backpack would be the one to do the reloading. They'd have to contort their arms to grab the round from their back and use it to reload your weapon. It would make much more sense for them to grab the round from your backpack and put it into your weapon. You wouldn't even have to change the animation. The animation looks more believable if someone else uses my backpack to reload my weapon. Now, something like the autocannon doesn't benefit as much from this. It's a very strong weapon as is, and the cost of having to reload yourself isn't that big. Having someone else reload for you while you just blast with the autocannon is cool, but it's a lot less beneficial to it than it is to the recoilless rifle, which I think is the one that really needs this change. Because I really like the recoilless rifle, I like the idea of it, I like how it works, and I like the way that the co-op reload works. But the current system places restrictions on it that make it a lot less effective than I think it should be. Alright, another addition I would like is the inclusion of a bestiary in the ship. A bestiary or a codex or an in-game library of some kind that I can read in the ship at some terminal that will talk about the various different enemy types that we fight. Something along the lines of what Deep Rock Galactic does. And maybe even include in that different ranks to what the bestiary describes. And your rank could depend on how many of that type of enemy you've killed. And as you rank up in that type of enemy, more about that enemy will be talked about or revealed. With higher ranks not only including flavor text, but also giving suggestions that could include the weak points of those enemies. And it could also use this to explain how some things work. For example, I have heard the developers confirmed that the bugs take 10% of total damage when you hit their weak points unless you're hitting them with explosive weaponry, which is not something that is telegraphed to you in-game. It's something that you just figure out. Well, if you added a bestiary, then maybe after you kill 10 chargers, it could reveal information of that type. I'd also appreciate not just a bestiary, but just general information regarding Super Earth and the lore. Again, maybe things that you unlock to find out as you play. And they could tie that to completing the optional objectives and missions or something. Alright, now this last one is kind of a personal problem, because it's a bug that isn't affecting that many people because most people don't care. And it's going to require some backstory for you to understand what the issue is. You see, I play shooter games with gyro aiming, and that's when you aim by moving the controller around. The gyro will behave as a mouse, and this lets you be almost as accurate as you would be with a mouse, while still using a controller. And I play all of my games this way because I like that level of accuracy, but I don't like to be stuck at my desk whenever I'm playing video games. I like to play on a couch or on a bed somewhere far away from my desk where I don't have to think about work. Now, playing on Steam, you can use the Steam inputs to enable the gyro on pretty much any game, and you can fiddle with it to make it work how you want. And that's what I was doing with Helldivers 2. But on the 15th of February, my gyro inputs were not working on Helldivers anymore. By looking around online, I found out that pretty much for everybody that was the case. If you were using Steam inputs to simulate a mouse, then for whatever reason it wasn't working. Okay, so at this point you might say, well, Ratatosker, why don't you just use the in-game gyro? Helldivers 2 is one of the few games that actually has gyro implemented as part of the game. You don't have to simulate a gyro through Steam, because the game supports it by default. And you're right, but there's two problems. Most developers don't understand gyro inputs, and so the settings that they put and the way that they implement it usually suck. Helldivers 2 is better than most. It's pretty okay, but it's not perfect, and it's nowhere near as good as what I can do by fiddling with the options I have available on Steam. More importantly though, the in-game gyro isn't working properly on PC. It has this weird stuttering effect that's very distracting. It happens when I aim and move the camera around left and right using the gyro. And that's not something that happens when you're using the analog stick. It also doesn't happen when you're using the mouse. And it didn't used to happen when the gyro simulated the mouse via Steam inputs. It only happens if you're using the game's built-in gyro controls. So if anyone at Arrowhead Studios is watching this, I am begging you to fix this. There's probably less than 100 people that this is affecting, but I promise it's affecting me really badly. I cannot play without the gyro anymore. It'd be nice if you can fix the weird stutter on PC, but that's not my main concern. What I really want is to be able to use the Steam inputs to simulate a mouse. So if you wouldn't mind, once you're done with all of the launch issues that have been plaguing this release, please change it back. Alright, that's the end of this video. As always, thank you very much for watching.